Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. And gratitude to you for reading me, for supporting my work. It makes all the difference. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, really. It means the world to me. My daughter Shanti, who for the last several years has been a high-powered lawyer in New York, has decided to follow her heart because her real calling is for healing. And she's a healer, and she has moved to Bath just in the last few weeks, so our family are gathering around us. And Shanti is also a singer, and I have asked Shanti to set the tone with a song that is very appropriate to the presentation I'm going to give. It'll just be a few moments. It's called Waiting for an Angel. And one thing I'll add, the guitar that Shanti is playing was my guitar. I started my writing career writing songs at the age of 16, and this guitar goes back to, actually, to 1965. And I have now gifted it to Shanti, and I'm so pleased that she's going to be playing it here.
Thank you for listening. So speak kind to a stranger, 'cause you never know. It just might be an angel come knocking at your door, or knocking at your door.
Bravo. Thank you, Shanti. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Shanti. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. I'll make a couple of preliminary remarks. It's just impossible with a huge subject like this for me to cover all of it in a talk, so I've had to be a bit selective. One of the things I'm going to be talking about today is a very curious connection that exists between the religion of ancient Egypt and the religion that was practiced by Native Americans in the Mississippi Valley. In case I forget to say it at the right point in the talk, I want to say it now. I am not suggesting or claiming that this was some kind of ancient Egyptian missionary expedition to the Mississippi Valley, and nor am I claiming that it was a missionary expedition from the Mississippi Valley to ancient Egypt. I think these similarities are the result of a legacy shared by both cultures, a legacy that was passed down from a remote common source, and that is indeed memorialized in their myths and traditions. And the second point I want to share is that actually religious ideas are, and religious thought are an amazing vehicle for carrying information and ideas down time through the future. They persist when many other aspects of culture fade away. We can say in terms, for example, of the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, if we go back to the time of Abraham and Ur of the Chaldees, we're going back at least 4,000 years. So these ideas that are still current in our society today have origins at least 4,000 years old, perhaps older than that. So it's not a crazy idea to think that notions can be carried, ideas can be carried and replicated within religious systems. I promise you the whole talk isn't gloomy, but this is a question that sooner or later everybody has to ask themselves, especially when you get to the grand old age of nearly 69. You do begin to ask yourself this question: what does happen to us when we die? We don't know. Professor Richard Dawkins, the author of The Selfish Gene, is convinced that we are just meat robots, total accidents of chemistry and biology and evolution, and that there is no such thing as the soul. That, of course, is not a scientific statement. We have not done the experiments and the tests to prove that there is no such thing as a soul. That's an opinion. In a way, that's a religious faith, to say that there is no life after death, there is no such thing as the soul. I happen to believe we are souls incarnated in human bodies. We're here in this theater of experience to learn and to grow and to develop. I had a brush with death in 2017. This is in the RUH in Bath. I was in an induced coma for 48 hours following a set of massive epileptic seizures, and my wife Santa was told that I would die. So I had an angel who came and rescued me, and that was my wife Santa, and that's why I've asked Shanti to sing this song. It's also given me cause to think about the mystery of life and death, something that in our society we push to one side, but that the ancients considered very deeply. We're looking here at the oldest religious writings of ancient Egypt. These are the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts. And they are so called because they are written inside pyramids of the 5th and 6th dynasty at Saqqara in Upper Egypt. And they are translated into English. Faulkner's edition of the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts is particularly highly recommended. They're the earliest of a body of literature of which the most familiar to us is the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. This entire body of ancient scriptures is all interconnected. They're conveying the same essential ideas. And those ideas concern the afterlife destiny of the soul. The ancient Egyptians believed that there was it's almost like a parallel dimension, another realm into which our consciousness enters after death as we leave our physical bodies behind. And they called that realm the Duat. We might translate that as the netherworld or the other world. And the god Osiris, my wife Santa took this photograph in the temple of Dendera in Upper Egypt. The god Osiris was seen as the lord of the afterlife kingdom, the lord of the Duat. And when the ancient Egyptians looked up at the sky at night and saw the constellation of Orion was for them the celestial image of the god Osiris. And the constellation of Orion was conceived of as a kind of portal through which the soul would travel to reach the Milky Way, which the ancient Egyptians called the winding waterway, and then would make a journey along the winding waterway, and there be confronted by challenges and trials and ordeals that we have brought upon ourselves in the lives that we have lived. On the left, the pyramid of Unas in Saqqara, 5th dynasty, with the pyramid texts on the side. On the right, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Santhas shot this deliberately as a double exposure. The Great Pyramid of Giza, which is completely uninscribed. There are no religious writings inside it at all. But what's intriguing about the entire Giza complex, including the River Nile, is the way that it mirrors a particular region of the sky. And that region of the sky is exactly the region of the sky that the ancient Egyptians believed our souls travel through after death. This was the Duat, the constellation of Orion, the Milky Way, and the constellation of Leo, rising in alignment with the gaze of the Sphinx. Now, I'm not saying whoever made this majestic site actually put the Nile River there, but I am suggesting that the site was chosen for that reason. This sky-ground mirroring, as above, so below. And a final point on this, because of the wobble on the Earth's axis, the positions of the stars in the sky change down the ages. And what we're looking at is not the sky above Egypt in 2500 BC, when the pyramids are supposed to have been built, but the sky above Egypt roughly between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago, between 10,800 BC and 9,600 BC. And this builds on the Orion correlation of my great friend and colleague, an absolute genius, Robert Bauval, the author of the Orion Mystery. So what we have at Giza, although there are no texts, what we have is an experiential three-dimensional model of the Duat, of the afterlife realm. How does the soul of the earthly deceased ascend to the Duat? Well, it's through that portal in Orion, and this is made very clear because there is a narrow shaft cut through the body of the Great Pyramid, and it targets exactly the lowest of the three stars of Orion's belt. And it's accepted by Egyptologists that this star shaft or soul shaft was the means of ascent, a symbolic means of ascent for the soul to leap up to the portal in the constellation of Orion and then to transit to the Milky Way and begin that hazardous and challenging afterlife journey. I did not expect when Santha and I came to Moundville in Alabama in the Mississippi Valley that I would encounter an almost identical religious system. Very little is left of the ancient North American monuments. More than 90% of the structures that were documented in the 19th century are now completely gone. And of the less than 10% that remain, the majority have been vandalized and destroyed. We are, however, looking at a bit of what's left of Moundville, and I was astonished to discover, as I went around the museum here and started talking to the experts, that here is a symbol. It shows a hand with an eye in it, except that's not an eye. And the hand was the way that the Native Americans saw the constellation of Orion. So I'll just read what the notice board actually says in Moundville Museum. As a group, the knotted serpents and the hand and eye are believed to be a representation of the night sky. The serpents are the ropes that join the earth and sky. In the palm of the hand is the portal or doorway through which the spirits of the dead can ascend the path of souls or Milky Way in their extended journey to the realm of the dead. The gateway or portal between the celestial realms and the earth disk was symbolized and artistically rendered as an open hand with an eye in its palm. We know this hand as part of the constellation of Orion. Once the portal was crossed, the souls of the dead began their journey by walking along a road or ribbon of light, the Milky Way. And indeed, it was called the Path of Souls in Native American tradition. And thus, over time, Moundville became, in the minds of the people, not only the symbolic gateway to the realm of the dead, but also its the materialized image of that sacred domain. And that, we argue, is exactly what the Giza monuments are as well. They're a materialized image of the sacred domain through which the soul travels after death. Diagrammatically, the ancient Native Americans saw Orion's belt as the wrist of that hand, and other stars formed the fingers and thumbs, and the portal is actually the Orion Nebula, which lies directly beneath the belt stars. And a number of really excellent scholars have worked together to crack the code of the Mississippian ideas. They did not have a written language. They expressed everything in symbolism. But fortunately, there are a number of Native American tribes who have carried the ideas of Moundville down, and working with them and with the symbolism, the code has been cracked. And it is understood that the portal in the hand must be entered by a leap, that the soul of the deceased must leap up to that portal in the constellation of Orion, and thence begin its journey along the Milky Way. George Langford, one of the leading scholars in the group who've been working on the Mississippian symbolic code, draws our attention to the fearsome image of a brain smasher, usually a woman, whose task is to destroy memory and humanity by removing or smashing the brain. There are, in fact, repeated references to the brain smasher in Native American tradition, a menacing female figure, usually called the brain smasher or the brain taker. And her role is the annihilation and permanent destruction of unworthy souls, of the damned, on the afterlife journey. So I was very intrigued by this scene in the ancient Egyptian Book of What Is in the Duat, one of those texts that I showed you, where we see, and I've expanded the key part of it here, we see a goddess standing with her hands stretched out towards a man who's kneeling before her. And what that man is doing, in fact, is he's smashing out his own brains with a hatchet. At least it looked like that to me. And looking at the scene, I didn't feel that the goddess was trying to stop him doing that. It felt more like she was exerting will or force to make him do that. But I needed to be sure. I needed to know if that was what it was all about at all. And since I don't read ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, I went to the British Museum, and I got an expert at the British Museum to translate these hieroglyphs for me. I did not explain to her why I wanted them translated. I simply said I want a direct translation of those hieroglyphs. And in due course, she came back to me, Louise Ellis Barrett, and this is the translation she gives. She lives, referring to that goddess, she lives from the blood of the damned and from what these gods provide her, the Ba soul who belongs to the damned, the demolishing one who cuts the damned to pieces. So it appears that in ancient Native America and in ancient Egypt, we have a female figure who is literally a brain smasher or a brain taker. There is a star in the constellation of Cygnus called Deneb, which stands at a fork in the Milky Way. And in the ancient Native American tradition, this star was seen as a figure of a bird, often manifested as some kind of raptor. And this bird had the power to stop the further progress of the soul on the journey along the Milky Way. And the soul would have to entreat with that bird and request it to open the way. Oddly enough, in ancient Egypt, exactly the same role is played by a different kind of bird. These traditions adapt to local circumstances, and the bird in ancient Egypt is an ostrich, not a raptor, but the soul declares, "Hail to you, ostrich, which is on the bank of the winding waterway. Open my way that I may pass." There are monstrous winged serpents in the ancient Egyptian netherworld. And there are monstrous winged serpents in the ancient American netherworld as well. And here is another challenger on the path of souls in the ancient American netherworld. He's called the underwater panther, clearly a feline figure of some sort. This is just a little clay figure of the underwater panther that has survived. I'm struck by its resemblance to the Great Sphinx of Egypt. I and my colleagues have always maintained that the Great Sphinx is more than 12,000 years old, and that originally the Great Sphinx had the head of a lion, that it was a fully leonine monument, but that the head was recarved during the period of dynastic Egypt into this human form, probably because the head was very damaged at that time. So I note the position of the forepaws on the underwater panther and on the Great Sphinx, and I note the way that the tail curls around the back. And I can't help feeling either this is some extraordinary coincidence or there is some deep-seated connection between these ideas. Amongst ancient Native Americans, there was a hero deity on the path of souls, and the role of that deity was to represent the triumph of life over death. And they called him the bird man, and he's depicted here carved on a whelk shell, and he has the head and beak of a hawk and a human body. Oddly enough, exactly the same role was played in ancient Egypt by the god Horus, and the god Horus has the head and beak of a hawk and the body of a human being. Amongst the Skidi Pawnee, who were not a Mississippi Valley people, amongst the Skidi Pawnee, there was, until their culture was almost completely destroyed by the radical progress of Anglo-Saxon so-called civilization, there was amongst the Skidi Pawnee a ritual functionary who was called the chief of the astronomers. The Skidi Pawnee were particularly interested in the stars. The chief of the astronomers is interestingly matched by a figure given exactly the same name in ancient Egypt, the chief of the astronomers. He was the high priest of Heliopolis, which was the cult center of the Giza pyramid. And just as the Skidi Pawnee, chief of the astronomers, wears a robe embossed with stars, so also does the ancient Egyptian chief of the astronomers. And furthermore, that robe embossed with stars, you can see from the leopard head here, it was in fact a leopard skin that was covered with stars, and in some cases in mortuary rituals the priests would wear a leopard skin, and that leopard skin, the spots on it in themselves were thought to represent the stars. So it's intriguing that amongst the Skidi Pawnee the same function was played by the skin of a wildcat, and its spots were thought to represent the stars, and a newborn child would be wrapped up in the skin of the wildcat to show that it was embraced by the stars. Again, I feel these connections become harder and harder to explain by coincidence. Let's jump over to the Amazon rainforest of South America, where the purpose of the portal for the soul is served by a very powerful visionary brew called ayahuasca. In our society, we refer to such substances as hallucinogens. I do not like the word hallucinogen because it carries a great deal of baggage. It implies that the visions received are trivial and not worthy. That was not the view in the ancient world. Visions received in altered states of consciousness, including dreams, were regarded as valid paths to true knowledge. It's very common in ayahuasca, in the visionary state, to see geometric patterns. I speak from experience because I've had more than 70 sessions with ayahuasca myself since 2003, when I first traveled to the Amazon to drink it. And here is the art of the Shipibo, people of the Peruvian Amazon, and you can see that this is their ayahuasca art. They depict it after coming out of the altered state of consciousness, and it shows these geometric patterns. And the Tucano of the Amazon and other Amazonian people are, their whole culture revolves around ayahuasca. They regard it as so important that actually a newborn child is given a teaspoonful of ayahuasca on birth. And the reason they do this is that they believe that we are surrounded by an invisible realm, and that whether we like it or not, that invisible realm is dealing with us, and we need to be proactive in dealing with it. Our society, of course, denies any such possibility. Here we see a Tucano shaman, they call them the Payes, guiding his son through an ayahuasca experience, helping him navigate the infinite terrain of the other side. And after the shamans come out of the visionary state of consciousness, they will frequently depict their visions on any surface available. Here we see a shaman depicting his geometric visions on sand on the bank of the Amazon River. Everybody in the Tucano community may drink ayahuasca, but when important work is to be done, a group of shamans will gather together and they will drink enormous quantities of ayahuasca. And by the way, ayahuasca means the vine of the dead or the vine of souls. They will drink enormous quantities of ayahuasca until they feel they are ascending to the Milky Way. And that isn't easily done. It's something that has to be learned. It's a skill. The apprentice may only get a foot or two off the ground, but eventually he will be able to soar up to the heavens in a single soaring flight and reach the zenith. I'm quoting here from Gerardo Reichel Dolmatov, his book, The Shaman and the Jaguar. He's one of the great anthropological experts on the cultures of the Amazon. And here's another of his book, Beyond the Milky Way. And he reproduces in it a depiction of the entrance to the other world as depicted in Tucano ayahuasca art. The origin myth of the Tucano is really rather interesting. It sounds like some kind of deliberate and purposive mission to the Amazon in which people were deliberately settled in the Amazon. What the Tucano say is that their ancestors were brought to the Amazon by a group of supernatural beings. And those supernatural beings included the daughter of the sun and a figure who was called the helmsman, because the helmsman steered the serpent canoe in which those first settlers were brought. And these so-called supernaturals taught the first settlers where they would find places that they could build their villages, where there would be good hunting, where they could make fields and propitious sites for housing. And then the supernaturals left and the Tucano were left to themselves in the Amazon and instructed to forever remember those so-called supernaturals and their teachings. They sound a lot more to me like people than like supernaturals. Oddly enough, the same story is told at the Temple of Horus at Edfu in Upper Egypt, but from a slightly different perspective. In the Temple of Horus at Edfu in Upper Egypt, written between the inner and outer enclosure walls, we can find an astonishing body of texts called the Edfu building texts. And these Edfu building texts, deeply inscribed on these walls, this is what they look like. We're told in the inscriptions, which again have been translated, we're told in the inscriptions that they were based on much older source documents, that there had been documents written on animal skins, which were falling apart, and in order to preserve them, the priests inscribed them deeply into the walls of the Temple of Horus at Edfu. And what those texts do is they speak of an island which was called the homeland of the primeval ones. And they tell us that it was destroyed in a great flood. And that flood was precipitated by some object coming down from the sky, a snake called the Great Leaping One, who assaults the homeland of the primeval ones and pierces it. And then it's swallowed up in a gigantic flood. But we're told that there were survivors, and that some of those survivors came to Egypt and built primeval mounds up and down the land, which were to be the site of all future temples and pyramids to be built in Egypt. And they also tell us that those survivors traveled all over the world. They didn't just confine their work to Egypt. They traveled everywhere, and there's a special word for their wanderings around the world, and their project was to reconstitute or resurrect their lost former world, or may I dare to say their lost civilization.